Okay, so today here I am going over some of the new forms that are required or part of the paperwork that could be required. This particular form doesn't necessarily have to be into play, but I'm going to explain when it would be in play and who can introduce it. My name is Andrew Texidor with Clearly Sold, brokered by EXP. And so without further ado, I'm going to get into this compensation agreement between brokers. This could be introduced either by the listing agent or by a buyer's agent. One thing that, and this is one form that is a little bit confusing. The thing about this form is it is supposed to be fully executed and delivered before an offer is delivered. That is difficult in a day and age when people don't answer the phone or respond quickly. Listing agents can be very busy taking phone calls and maybe don't respond. There's plenty of reasons why there would be a delay to respond to someone. So if this form has the opportunity to be fully executed and delivered before an offer, which just sounds so weird, then this would be the form that would use. I'm going to go over all the lines. This is a brand new form, and so I'll take some time with it. Under the parties, it explains the buyer or the tenant acting through the agent's name and representing the buyer. So the first line is the broker, number two is the agent, for the third spot, it would be the buyer or the tenant's name. Then the broker for the seller would be listed on line 4. Line 5 would have the agent for that same broker for the selling side. Then lot 2, we're going to determine the premises by an address, an assessor's number, a city, county, and the zip code. And then I'll just say compensation is a new word that we're using exclusively. We're no longer using the word commissions. And so you'll see that change throughout a listing agreement and on a seller's compensation addendum. You'll see that in the purchase contract. There's a lot of places where there's changes. Okay, so compensation, the terms, the agreement shall become effective when fully signed. The agreement is contingent upon the fully signed agreement being delivered prior to or with an offer made by buyer to purchase or lease the premises. Buyer and seller enter into a purchase contract or lease of the premises within 10 days or blank days of seller broker signing this agreement, and if applicable, buyer closing escrow to purchase the premises pursuant to that purchase contract. Buyer broker compensation, seller broker agrees to compensate buyer broker in accordance with the terms and conditions below. So this sellers is where this is the form that you would sign that authorizes your realtor to offer compensation to a buyer's broker, which would help you to facilitate the sale of your home and get top dollar for it. And so it says on line 15, it says for the sale, whatever percentage is negotiated or of the full price, or there's a box that can be checked for a dollar amount. That is something that I will never use. It would either be a percentage of the purchase price or be a fixed dollar amount that we would negotiate up front, but it would never be other in my case. I am not even sure what other would be in the case of a sale. And compensation to buyer broker is earned and payable when buyer or an entity owned or controlled by the buyer closes escrow on a purchase or exchange of the premises, and buyer broker represents buyer in such transaction as indicated on the purchase contract. Any escrow or closing agent may pay buyer broker compensation from seller broker's compensation at close of escrow. So it goes on to say the lease, what percentage of the gross rental, or a fixed dollar amount. And then it says that compensation is earned when the entity or controlled by the buyer or seller execute a lease agreement for the premises. Alternative dispute resolution. This says that we resolve any issues. We agree to mediate any dispute or claim arising out of or relating to this agreement. All mediation costs shall be paid equally by the parties. In the event that mediation does not resolve all disputes or claims, the unresolved disputes or claims shall be submitted to binding arbitration pursuant to the most recent version of the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual published by the NAR. Judgment on the award rendered by the arbitration panel may be entered into in any court of competent jurisdiction. Line 5 would be any additional terms. And 31, assignment, neither seller, broker, nor buyer broker may assign any rights or obligations pursuant to this agreement without the prior written consent of the other. And any attempted assignment without consent shall be void and of no effect. So this form, they need to have a form signed with a specific buyer and a specific seller in every case. You're not assigning this form to a new, say, buyer, because the buyer also has to be in agreement with the fixed amount of compensation up front. So it can't just be assumed through this. Arizona law shall be governed by, this agreement shall be governed by Arizona law, and jurisdiction is exclusively conferred on the state of Arizona. So in Arizona, we do business with people from all over the country and all over the world. And so a lot of times there's people like, say, in New York, where they close with attorneys. And so a buyer might say, oh, I want my attorney to look at this. And they think that their attorney can make changes, and that's just not the case. Our contract is our contract. We just fill in the empty spots on the boilerplate. But we don't do like cross outs and lines through any of this stuff. It's just not the way it works. What that could be presented either by the seller's agent saying, hey, my seller's willing to pay X amount up front, or the buyer's agent can fill this out in correspondence or along with their buyer broker exclusive agency agreement. So that is also a new form that's required of all buyers prior to showing any homes. And the gist of that is that as a buyer's representative, realtor, we have to be upfront about presenting, hey, you are ultimately responsible for commissions, and then we negotiate what that amount would be upfront. And then I'll just tell you, everything's a negotiation. And so for the 24 years I've been in the business, the seller's always paid the commissions, or they've agreed to pay the commissions, and it's the buyer's funds that are paying it. So it's kind of like, I believe that it's the buyer's funds that pay all the commissions. And because the seller never pays the commission until it's taken out from the buyer's proceeds at close of escrow. So it's not like the buyer's going into their own money, their own bank account, and writing a check to their listing agent for 2.5% or 3% to list their house. No, it's coming out of the retail sale of that property. Always has been, always will be. There's only two parties that are interested, right? They're principals. It's the seller and the buyer. All monies come from the two of them. Okay, so that is the compensation agreement between brokers, and this is one form where we can show how and who is paying what. It's always going to be predetermined, and it's going to be spelled out here. And in the next video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the seller compensation addendum, and then I'll also be going over the listing contract, because there's changes there. And so there's 18 forms that are either new or amended, and so I'll be going over all of them and how they affect you as a seller or a buyer, and strategies. I am a strategist and a marketing guy, and so I help sellers sell fast for top dollar using strategies that most agents just don't know. Okay? Thanks so much. Make it a great day.